Hello and welcome to the Crit to Block podcast. We are your hosts, Eric Malott
and Richard Lavery.
And we are once again joined by two of AMG's finest, Will Shick, VP of Creative Development and Strategy, and Michael Plummer, Game Development Manager. Gentlemen, how are you? And are you officially joining Crit to Block as regular podcast hosts, or...
It feels that way at this point. So, I mean, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, I go where they tell me, so
that's true.
So I guess that's what I'm doing.
First of all, I don't control this. Ross and Amon control this. We follow marketing's like orders on this stuff. So you just got to talk to them. You know, we can become regulars, and as long as they say, just be there.
Yeah, a couple well-placed bribes, and you're in. So that's all we need.
Yeah, we're definitely happy to have you back. We're here to talk about Towards a Duty today. You know, back at Adepticon, y'all kind of hinted at a narrative-style version of Legion that was going to drop around when the starters were being released. The starters are being released, and Towards Duty. So, to kick us off, can you just give us a brief history of how Towards a Duty came to be, and how did we get to where we are right now?
Oh my gosh! All right, well, that's only like a 2-year-ish or more journey. I think like the short answer to that really is that we've always been super intrigued by doing campaign play in all of the games we do. You know, most of us on the dev team or even at AMG have been lifelong hobby miniatures gamers, and if you've played any hobby miniatures game, you know that kind of the holy grail of that experience is a narrative linked campaign. And I think we've all tried to run some. We've all been a part of some. We've probably all never finished a single one because that's usually how they go. But they were fun at the time to do. And so as we were working on everything and looking at the new edition, actually Will Pagani, our development director, came in and he said, "Hey, I think we can do a really cool campaign system. I've been looking at what some other companies have been doing. I have some ideas on how we can solve some of the issues of like, you never finish, you need all these people to do it." Because other folks had been trying to innovate and do these different things. And so he was like, again, we talk about kind of the idea that nothing is new. Everything is just other ideas mixed in different ways to create new stuff or innovative stuff. And so, it was like, that sounds great. Like, start working on it, see what happens. He roped in Mr. Plummer, who's with us today, to like start working on the genesis of the rules and everything. And it really didn't start full on until about a year before we were ready for the new edition, because we needed to know how the game worked and where we were going to sit and all that stuff. And thankfully by that point, we had also landed on doing the customizable commanders, which was an entirely different track. Those weren't developed because of Tours of Duty, and Tours of Duty certainly wasn't made because of them. They just kind of synergized really well serendipitously. That whole process started with some exploration on hard plastic frame making, and effectively the engineers in Dallas and the creative team being like, well, how far can we push stuff? And him and I talking about, a lot of hobby miniatures kits have a lot of options and you can build your own thing and all this stuff. What would that look like for us? What if we did customizable miniatures for, Edge Studios Star Wars RPG, because we're all in the same Asmodee family and things like that. How crazy could we get with customizability? And from there, it kind of turned into a thing where I was like, oh, I think we got something here. I think we can take this to dev and actually make this into something that Legion players will ideally super gravitate towards, be excited about, and enjoy. And so when those two things came together, it kind of provided, I think, that last link to where, Michael was able. It's so weird to call him Michael. It's Plummer. I don't think I've called you that like once in a job interview 20 years ago or something.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
So that was the point at which, Plummer took Pagani's effectively design brief. He took the customizable commanders as kind of the frontliners, the iconic like centerpieces of what Tours of Duty would be, and he started drafting. So then he can talk about that whole process and where it went.
Yeah, so it all started off, like, honestly, a couple years ago. As soon as Pagani started talking about doing something like this, we're gaming buds on top of being coworkers. So we would just chat about ideas, and we would talk on lunch about, like, oh, this would be cool, that would be cool, what would I do in this, what would you do in that? And then when it came down and was real and was no longer just like lunchtime conversations and was hey, make this and we need it by X date. That's when it gets really interesting, and we get the opportunity to look at like how long do we want this thing to run. Shick alluded to the fact that we've all played these campaigns, but most of us have never finished one. So Pagani and I just had this idea that like, what if it never has to end, and what if no one else has to be playing for you to be able to play it? So we started from the idea that this is your story that you want to tell, because like we said the other day when we were co-hosting with you. A lot of the experience of playing tabletop miniatures games is sort of like this self-insert, this exciting, like this is the character that I made, this is my army, and treating your army list sort of like an RPG character. And so like that's where the idea that this could be something that you play, and as long as your opponent agrees, you can do this. And we very much from there decided that this is going to use standard games of Legion. It's going to use all the battle cards, and we're just going to layer the idea of the agenda. Came up very early on that it's something that we could just layer on top of the standard game, and that way players have this, again, touchstone, this thing that they can harken back to. Like, they know how to play a standard game of Legion, but there are some extra bits and bobs that make it unique and make it narrative, make it story. And we knew that we wanted it to be very Star Wars. Like that was very paramount in our minds. Like, it has to be Star Wars. It can't just be another campaign. And so that's where the idea of the story arcs came through. Each story arc is like a movie or a season of the television show as you play through your battles, and you have your agendas, and you win some battles, you lose some battles, and then you have your turning point mission, which again, we wanted to have a large climactic battle that's going to happen occasionally and is going to have stakes. So that's when the idea of the turning points came in. And when we were talking about the turning points, again, we came back to, we want this to look just like a standard game of Legion, but it does something special. So when you look at the turning point missions, they have all the parts of a standard game of Legion. They have an objective, they have secondary objectives, they have advantages, and that's all baked in so that players who are playing this narrative experience that is new to them can look at it and say like, oh, this is just like the normal game. This is how that works. This is how this works. So it really is just another way of playing the same game. And that was very important throughout the whole thing. Like, we kind of threw balance out the window at one point because early on there were nowhere near as many commendations. And we looked at it and we were like, this is kind of boring. There's only like 10 things you can give. And we were so nervous about, putting the wrong keyword on the wrong unit and it being super powerful that we kind of lost sight of the fun. So then it was Andrew Dursum who said, we should just give the fun back, and who cares if it's balanced. And it was this light bulb moment, because I had been so deep in the weeds of like, making sure that it hit all the points, and balance is always a point that's in my head, and this one doesn't need it as much. So Durston was absolutely right, and when we opened those floodgates and let people kind of do whatever they want with their units, it became much more exciting and much more fun, and it all kind of came together, and now we have what's in front of everyone and what has been really well received, which has been super exciting to watch people get hype about it and get excited and read about people playing their games. And I guess that's kind of how we got from point A to point B. It was just little steps of like finding out what are the things that aren't working in other games, that aren't working in what we've done in the past, because we've played these games for 20 years, and just trying to find incremental solutions for each of them until we had something that was fun.
Mm-hmm. I kind of want to jump off that thought then real quick there. So, you talked a little bit about kind of these turning points and these arcs that you're playing a series of the show or a season of the show or one of the movies. What else do you think really makes this format stand out compared to other campaign style tabletop games? You mentioned there's a few of them. You've pulled things you've liked from some, you've improved upon others. What makes this one really special and draw more people to Legion?
I think the big thing about it comes back to the fact that it can be a solo experience, and that it is something that, campaigns are a bit like live service games a lot of the times. And what I mean by that is that you have to constantly be grinding them and playing them to keep up with everyone else, right? And the second that you step away from it, because it's kind of a group run thing, and I think this is why they fall apart. Like you miss a week, or you miss a couple of weeks because you go on vacation or whatever, and now all of a sudden you're 2 weeks behind, if that's even possible, or you've stopped the campaign for 2 weeks, that kind of thing. And for us, the big one was, okay, how do we how do we solve that problem? And by making it a solo experience, it becomes much more like a non-live service game, like a classic game, where you can play it for 3 or 4 months, decide you're done playing it, come back in a year and pick it right back up where you left off and not have missed anything, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean, and again, we wanted to make sure that groups could come together, like friend groups, community groups, whatever, could come together and run Tours of Duty as like a traditional group. That is fully possible. And I think that is where, a lot of these stories become the most fun, because you're now interacting and learning other people's story at the same time, and sharing stories is a very big human thing that we all connect around the fireplace with. We're very narrative driven, like creatures. But that said, right, like you can just go to a convention, go to open play, and like at the next Adepticon, and just start playing Tours of Duty with your list. You can stop playing Tours of Duty when somebody doesn't, is not interested in that experience, and then you can pick it up right back up in the next game. And to me, that was really the part where once it was explained how it worked and how that would function and everything else. And despite Plummer saying that we threw balance out the window, I think the other big thing was the fact that, yes, like an RPG character, right, they're not limiters. You can min-max, you can do narrative things, you can do that. We talked a little bit about making the rules for the combinations randomized. We walked away from that because it wasn't as fun, because a lot of times you would wind up getting something that was like, this isn't really great. And we also assumed that if you're really engaging in Tours of Duty, what you're trying to do is tell a story, which means that when your unit gets a commendation, you are going to pick the one that narratively makes sense for them. Like, it's going to be based on what their game actions were, what they've been doing in the game, and you're going to turn that unit into part of your army's character. And, so just like any RPG, you've got a lot of different styles of player. You've got the min-maxer, you've got the storyteller, you've got the person who's just along for the ride, that kind of thing. But that was the mentality that we took here too. And then the challenge is saying, okay, when somebody with a Tours of Duty list shows up at a table and they're going to play somebody who's not playing Tours of Duty, how do we make sure that experience feels like a game of Legion, like a normal game of Legion? It's definitely not a tournament game, right? But it never was going to be when you accept that kind of stuff and go into that. And I think one of the things that's so cool about that system is it does remind me a lot of miniature wargaming in the 90s, where tournaments were still a thing that happened, but there was a lot more freedom of expression in even like the biggest ones, like thinking like 40K, second edition especially, but a little bit of third, fourth, fifth, Warhammer Fantasy Battles, those kinds of things, BattleTech, these different games. Like before the 2000s, wargaming was still kind of in its youth, and it was still heavily based off those Rogue Trader days where it was GM'd and you had like this experience that wasn't really balanced. Like competitive balance wasn't really necessarily the thing. It was more, we're going to put things on the table, we're going to tell a story, we're going to have a good time, we're going to have this experience. And the thing that I really love is that I feel like Tours of Duty harkens back to that. It's an homage to that kind of like moment where you have these chapter unapproved things that you can do. And during a casual game, you and your opponent can be like, cool, let's do this. Like, let's explore the boundaries of this sandbox rather than restricting ourselves to one corner of it or saying that this is the only way to play. And that's where a lot of this magic comes from. And I think from an aspirational standpoint, even the vast majority of competitive quote unquote players who are mostly focused on skill development and winning the tournaments and finding the list optimization, they still have that drive to be like, yeah, but I'm telling Star Wars stories, right? I'm seeing Luke Skywalker do cool things that I am in control of. I'm the narrator of what's going on along with my opponent. And so I really love the fact that we're injecting that idea back into it, where it's like, yeah, there's so much potential with these games. You don't have to just follow the rule book. You can, with your opponent's permission, have fun with your little miniatures and tell stories and do narrative stuff and do these things that aren't necessarily just by the rules, right? And that's not to say the rules aren't fun, but I think creativity and play, it's a game. It's a game. Play. Find play that goes to you. Yeah.
I think for me, if there's one thing that we got right, for me, it's the idea of the story arcs. I think that's really cool. they're obviously like they're very coded, right? Like this one is coded to be Galactic Empire, and this one's coded to be Rebel Alliance because we wanted people to be able to like look at something and read it and be like, oh yeah, this reminds me of the movies. But you are absolutely free to take those and like mess with the story a little bit and make it fit your army, so you can play the one that's coded to the Rebels with your Galactic Empire army or your CIS army. And one thing that's really cool about it is it lets you make your campaign be your story. It's not the story that came in the book that you bought. It's not the story that we posted online for you necessarily. Like players have the freedom to say, I'm going to pick and choose, and I'm going to use these cards in this story, and I'm going to mess with this. Like this sounds too goody two shoes, and my guy's kind of a bad guy, so this is my story, and that's really fun because it gives people a chance to be creative. And again, like Shick was just saying, like to play with the game and to play with the ideas of the characters and to play with the idea of Star Wars, which when I was a little kid, like all I wanted to be was Luke Skywalker. Like that's it. That was my dream. What do you want to do when you grow up? Luke Skywalker. And unfortunately I didn't make that, but I can now like sit at home and play a game with my friends, and I can have like my character, my Jedi on the table, and they can fight the way I want them to fight and play through the story that I want to play. And that's really meaningful to me because I've been playing these games for like 20 years and playing these campaigns. And like, I remember sitting down and making armies when I was a kid and naming every trooper, which was a bit much. But now like the freedom to like let people name their units and do this and tell the story they want to tell as opposed to the story that we want them to tell. I think that's what we got right here.
Yeah, I think we've all been a part of those games where it's like very lopsided. Someone is really trying hard and very competitive and kind of saps the fun out for the other person who's like, I'm just here to push little plastic minis around and like make pew pew noises and like, yeah, tell a story, do some kind of narrative thing.
That feels like a direct shot, Eric.
You aren't. No, I'm thinking of, there are people who are, we have experienced them, Richard, where they take the enjoyable aspect out of it. And I think this is a really good way to steer people back to that reminder of like, we're playing with Star Wars toys.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing, right, is that there's really no one right way to play. But the reality is that, you know, especially in kind of the modern gaming environment, we see a lot more emphasis put on organized tournaments and on this competitive side. And there's a lot of good reasons for that, right? Like, open play is great if you have a store that can support it, but a lot of stores may not have the floor space. They may not have the ability. There's tons of games out there, right? You're always going to be running Magic. That's probably how you're turning your lights on and other things. So like, and then we as people just all have these different responsibilities. And maybe you're a dad of two, maybe you're, you know, a young guy working two jobs. Maybe you're still in school and you're trying to get your graduate degree. So she doesn't have a lot of time to come out and play, you know, that kind of stuff. Tournaments give you that structured ability to say, okay, this one Saturday this month, I'm clearing my schedule and I'm going to go play 4 games, right? And I don't have to worry about finding an opponent. I don't have to worry about these things. Like, I just have to show up and I have to play. And so, you know, I think we've seen that grow as people have become more busy and life has become more like slightly chaotic. And the games have moved a little bit from like kitchen table ideas where you're going to play on a kitchen table with like your terrain in your house to being more of a centralized community thing, which I think is great, right? Like moving out of the house more and connecting with players that you wouldn't normally play with. That's pretty awesome. That was something that like we had tournaments when I was like up and coming in the 90s, and I ran a lot of those for my local game store for like the Games Workshop games that they supported because that's what you did back then. But like 90% of the time, because I was in high school and my friends were in high school and we had no responsibilities. They just show up to my house and I had a game board in my room, and that's where we played like all of our games. We didn't really go out looking for people. It never really clicked into our heads that we'd want to go to a convention and, you know, play with these, because that's what we did. But life has changed and things are different. So I think the big thing, right, it's reminding people or bringing back in the focus or refocusing on the fact that there's a larger set of things that you can do with these games. Like Plummer always says, right, you can do whatever you want with these games once they're in your hand. There is no secret police that's going to break down your door and say you are playing the game wrong. And And at the end of the day, what we're trying to provide is a framework that allows players to interact with the game in whichever way they enjoy and whichever way their opponent's going to enjoy, because they are co-opetitive. You have to have somebody to play with you. So you better make sure that person's also having a good time. And I think that's where conversation and all the social stuff goes into it. But players, I think gamers in general have always wanted permission, right? Because you're like, oh, well, there's a rule book. So if there's a rule book, clearly you have to follow the rules. We're very ingrained in that, in society and everything else, is that you follow the rules. So oftentimes you need that nudge of permission, or that thing that says, yeah, but you need your chapter approved. You need your whatever. You need your rule set that says, here's the framework now to break the rules. These are new rules. You can do them in this way. And that's really our goal, is to make sure that players have those types of, like, here's some permission, right? We did the little drop of the dangerous environments last year, which said now you can add some global effects to theme your games if you want to. These aren't going to show up at a tournament most likely, but they're there. They're another tool in the toolbox to start adding that narrative to try to explore these different things and add different challenges. I think, a lot of times the folks who are really focused on skill development and stuff, and they're like, yeah, I really love being able to get into a game and find the right solutions and do have a battle of wits and strategy and tactics with my opponent. For me, it was always more exciting when there's more unpredictability, because it challenges you more to problem solve in the moment. And so adding those like dangerous environments and stuff where you're like, oh, great, now the gravity turned off and all my troops are floating in the air. Like, how do I deal with this? There's player types who really love that. There are, of course, player types who just want to like create their Rube Goldberg machine and see if it runs. But I think, all those different things like really bring it in and do stuff. And then on top of that, campaign stuff, whether it exists or not, right? Even the most tournament focused like guy or gal, when they're playing that game and that one trooper survives insurmountable odds, and their opponent goes, you got to give that trooper a special paint job. You got to give him a name, right? They're always right into it. So, and that's all Tours of Duty is doing. It's just giving you extra rules to say, okay, in addition to your fancy paint job, you now get this ability, or you get to do that, or whatever. So I think naturally we're all storytellers at heart when it comes to these games, and that's the really cool part about Tours of Duty, is that it's opening up that permission, it's giving players that framework, and it's hearkening, it's refocusing kind of on these games are a lot more than just what we kind of commonly discourse about, because it fits within our schedules, it fits within how we need to interact for the most part with these games, and our goal is to make sure that it seamlessly fits into the player experience as well at the store and at your kitchen table or wherever you play them.
And I just want to point out, like, there are things inside of Tours of Duty that are built in order to facilitate that kind of play. I mean, I think it's very fun to play tournament level Star Wars Legion, very mechanically precise, being very careful about where I place things and what I'm doing and my list construction. Like, that's all well and good. But we put things inside of Tours of Duty that benefit you when you don't do that. Like when a unit is taken out and you make your casualty roll, like nothing can happen to them and they get some experience because that was bad and we don't want to do that again. So, like, it sort of gives players permission to lose because it's interesting when the heroes lose. I mean, The Empire Strikes Back is a great movie, and so many people love it and will call it their favorite Star Wars because the good guys lose for a while. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, and it's the games that go horribly wrong, but none of your units die and they get a bunch of extra experience. Like, that stuff's going to happen. You're going to have a cool story, and you have permission to fail. And like, even if you lose your turning point, you get something, and that something isn't good, but it adds to the story. So all of those things exist inside of the format to kind of do the whole like show don't tell. Like, we don't flat out say like, hey, it's okay if you lose, but the game shows you like bad things happen to me and I'm still advancing. I'm still moving forward. The story goes on.
And I think the agenda, how you move your agenda forward to get to that turning point is also a really cool thing that Plummer and the team plugged into the game, which is, you can have those games where you're just getting rolled and you're like, all right, but I can still get a couple of agenda points, right?
You can still make progress.
And that becomes kind of the thing where you're like, okay, this is my Empire Strikes Back. I'm not going to win. I'm going to lose. However, the story continues forward, and that failure becomes a success in the overall narrative of the thing. Yes, the rebels were driven off Hoth. However, right, they successfully escaped and they regrouped, and Luke got to Dagobah and got his training, blah 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 blah. Like whatever's happening in your story, you can still be like, yes, but we accomplished it. Many Bothans died, as we all know. We don't know what a Bothan is, but a lot of them died, and yet they still accomplished their mission. So is that a victory or not? We don't know. And I think that's another really cool thing, and it's something that I know there's been conversations about. Well, like I don't want my units to potentially face death or to get setbacks or that kind of thing. So can I just concede? Right? We saw a little bit of that discussion, and again, this comes back to like, well, do whatever you want, right? Like there's no secret police, but I think if you look at the intent with the agendas and stuff, the point is that even if you're in a situation where like you're just getting absolutely stomped and nothing's going your way and it's the worst day of Legion of your life, you can still advance your agenda, right? The driving your story forward is still there. And in the overall narrative, like storytelling experience, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice if you don't play it out. If you don't just let the story evolve the way it is. It is a bit of a choose your own adventure story, and it can really feel like it. No one likes to see their favorite characters die, absolutely, but sometimes a character death is the driving force that makes a great story, right? So those are kind of some of the things too that are in there, and I think that's also a really neat balance point where, as Plummer said, you have permission to lose and yet still have that become a critical part of the overall story that you'll tell years from now, right? When you look at that register and you say, oh, I remember all these different moments, and I remember when this happened, and I remember when disaster struck and I lost my commander, and then I had to bring in a fresh new guy, and he was like not quite as good, but then he became the ultimate hero, and now I love him more than I love my original commander. Whatever happens, you're going to be able to tell that story, and kind of choosing to opt out of bad situations. Well, it can seem like the right game thing to do, I think, can be sort of detrimental to that overall like tale that you're telling, because characters need setbacks just as much as anything else. If you look at any kind of like critical dialogue on why certain movies are not good or not, usually what people point out is like, well, there's no character development. They didn't have to struggle to do anything. And this other character that I like better, they had setbacks and failures and all of it. But typically, because humans are skill-based, kind of like driven, right? The better you get at throwing a spear, the less likely you are to get eaten by a tiger, So we have this motivation to always see our skills improve. That's part of what makes the hobby so enjoyable. It's part of what makes playing these games so enjoyable, is the fact you get to see your skills improve. It's the same thing with your force, right? Like if you never suffer setbacks, are you really going to feel accomplished by the time you get to the end of that agenda? Or are you just going to be like, yep, I just rolled right through it. It was great, I don't know, right? I think you need that challenge.
You need something to overcome.
Things. Yeah, exactly. You want to see yourself, I think you want to see that army in a real thing, and that obviously is very subjective, but all of this stuff will be.
Yeah, and I know there's one convention I know of that is already planning on adding this to their event list for the next year. And I know you guys have mentioned when you were talking with Fifth Trooper about encouraging people to bring tours registers to Adepticon. So I guess, do you have kind of a vision for how this would be put into a more formal not tournament, but like an event? Or do you have like expectations that it will take off and kind of be there alongside standard competitive Legion? Or is it just kind of up to whoever's organizing? I mean, obviously it can be up to whoever's organizing, but... Right.
I think there's a couple of different. I think we've talked about a couple of different ways to employ it. The first is that if there's open play, like for example at Adepticon, there's always open play. We typically run a campaign or kind of a 4-day narrative, linked thing where you get special abilities and bonuses. There's going to be a big one of those at Adepticon this year for Legion that we've been working on for a couple of years. And it's pretty crazy. There's going to be massive posters, and you're going to get to put stickers on them to advance your agendas for your factions. And based on how those agendas advance, you're going to get super big bonuses and things like you can complete the Death Star if the Empire comes together and does it all together. You can actually build a Death Star. I don't know if enough games will get played to get to that point on the chart, but that's the end goal. And then, of course, once they do that, it's going to be scary times for everyone who has to fight Empire, of course. But there's obviously every faction has that. So with that system, you can obviously play Tours of Duty. And it kind of encourages that, hey, I'm going to play a Tours of Duty register, like we're just having casual pickup games, whatever. And then on top of that, we are talking with the Adepticon team about running kind of a condensed Tours of Duty event where everyone shows up with a register and effectively you play X number of matches. And I think X is the big thing that Plummer and the team will have to figure out with Adepticon and their team. And you run through that. I think there's also some rumors in the works that we're going to have a new agenda for folks who show up at Adepticon to be able to play, and that one will obviously get disseminated after the show for the rest of the community to be able to play as well. But so we had a lot of cool ideas and a lot of excitement around Tours of Duty, and it's exciting to hear that other conventions are kind of picking up on that and wanting to run more of that. I think the more it's adopted by the community, the more we're going to be able to do for it and expand on it. And so that's very exciting to us to be able to do.
Yeah, and I've already got some ideas popping around in my head about things we can do to sort of like accelerate the rate at which you kind of get to like upgrade your stuff, because obviously you can only play so many games at the convention over the weekend. But like there are definitely ways that we could make it so that you get sort of the whole Tours of Duty experience, or at least like the length of a story arc or so of advancement over the few days, even if you only get to play a few games. So yeah, I think it's all about like being creative with this, because again, this is a fun storytelling narrative format that is not necessarily beholden to all of the structure and stricture of tournament play or even just like Legion as it exists in the rule book. So we can throw a lot of curveballs and we can do a lot of things, and also like if you are running a Tours of Duty event for a weekend, whether it's at a convention or it's just you and your community at your game store, like make up something cool and do it. I look forward to reading about that stuff in the Legion Discord. I love going in there and hearing what people are saying and what cool thing they're going to do. And like, I remember immediately people were like, we should use the dangerous environments with this. And then there were people that like came up with a system where before the game, you roll a die and on this result, you do one, on this result, you don't. And I was like, that's awesome. That's great.
That's pretty cool.
And again, like I say this every cast, but like it's yours, play with it, do what you want with it. So like make something that works for you and your friends that y'all are going to have fun playing, because that's going to be the most successful Tours of Duty thing you've done.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like our goal with all of this stuff, and I know some players are like, why are they spending time on this when they could do this, right? And that's very much a personal opinion, and I get it, right? Again, like we always talk about, everything is kind of subjective in what we do because it's creative art. And so you're not wrong to say, well, you could spend time on this or that. Now, there's definitely things that I think people don't think about, like manufacturing bandwidth, sculpting bandwidth, that kind of stuff. Dev bandwidth is just because the devs have time to create cool new rule sets doesn't mean that everyone else in the studio has time or bandwidth to create the miniatures to go along with that or to do whatever else goes with it, right? Or even if the studio does, that doesn't mean that Asmodee as our publisher and our distributor has the ability or the bandwidth to do that with the various manufacturers they work with and things like that. So there's always limiters, there's always considerations. It is a massive and complex clock where everything has to tick together, and it's very fine tuned to make sure those things happen. But there's always time like baked in to do cool things. And so what we love to do is take that free bandwidth, take those ideas, and effectively, the goal is to create these different modules that then, as Plummer mentioned, you can mix together, right? Spec ops or special operations is kind of like that. Like I look forward to the moment when somebody takes their registered unit from Tours of Duty, have them run a spec ops game, right? And link that into their Tours of Duty thing, like with the dangerous environments, with whatever. That, I think, going back again kind of to the nostalgic like heyday of thinking about wargaming and how players used to kind of, and I think some players still do, but I think, again, the focus has kind of shifted away from this. And what we really want to do is bring that focus back or bring that thought process back into players' minds is you have all these different modules. Mix and match them how you want. Like stick them together in weird and fun ways. Like find the things that make your small gaming group, just you and your 3 friends, or you and your entire store if everybody's in line, like in that way. And then, everybody kind of wants, I think all of us want to have a little bit of game developer in us. And then we think about these cool ideas and we think about these things that we wish people would do, right? And be like, oh, it'd be neat if they did this and they did that. And I was like, if we haven't made a special operations unit that you really want and you want to run it in a campaign because it matches your register, like just use the cards that exist and use the miniatures that you want to use and be like, yeah, that they're not named right, but it doesn't matter because the rules can apply to these guys, and now I can run my special operations unit from my tours of duty list that I want to using these rules. And maybe it doesn't even match the faction. Maybe you're like, these guys are like the crack units of my rebels, and I want them to have Mandalorian rules, so I'm going to use the Super Commando special operations team, and those rules are going to apply to these guys. And your opponent be like, that's awesome. I'm gonna use the Stormtrooper unit for my droids because that's what matches for me. Maybe you come up with some different equipment or whatever. Like you've got a GM who's just throwing out crazy ideas. But the point is that it doesn't matter, right? Like you can do all of that and you can use the framework that we're providing either as it's intended, or you can use it as building blocks, as customizable, modular, clicky plastic bricks to not like step on anybody's affected trademarks. And create your own thing, right? Like there's so much potential, and I think our goal again is to continue to add to that in ways that stand alone, that we think add value to players in the game experience on their own, but also to hopefully provide players with this huge set of different options and opportunities, and then through conversations like this, through discussions like that, be like, hey, if you want to mix and match, go for it. If you want to start being really crazy and zany with your group because you guys think that would be fun, do it. Like that's the whole point, Mm-hmm. That's the reason that I think so many of us stick with this stuff, is that it is fun to explore and it's fun to play and it's fun to be creative, and nothing's saying that you also can't be a part of that with this experience and this journey, right? Of course, you have to make sure that the other players you're playing with want to do that. And then you always have to keep in mind, you want to make sure that everyone's having a good time at the table, because you can make the coolest campaign system out of tours of duty and dangerous environments and special operations that you possibly can. And you think it's the best thing ever and it's the most fun you've ever had. But if nobody else is having fun with it, you're probably not going to get to play it. So you do always have to, again, think about that co-opetitive, like there's just as much important that everyone else you're playing with has as much fun or more fun. And this is a struggle I have with my kids all the time when they're playing board games with their friends. Because we're the game house in the neighborhood, right? Like, so we have all of these weird games that they've never played before. They all look cool. The kids, our boys will bring like their neighborhood friends over and they'll be like, we're going to play this game. And then I'll half listen and they'll just be like, you didn't explain this rule. I'll be like, well, tough. I've totally destroyed you now. Like these kinds of things. Or like, they'll be like, you can't do that. That's cheating. And the kid's like, I didn't know that was the rule. And they're like, stop cheating. And I'm like, dude, they're not. You haven't. So then I have to pull them aside and be like, look, you like playing games with the kids in the neighborhood, right? They're like, yes. I'm like, cool. Do you think that you would want to play with yourself again after what just happened today? And they're like, meh. They do that teenager, like, can I introspect? And then I'm like, all right, let me give you examples of what you did. And, my mantra to them is always like, if you want people to play with you, you have to go out of your way to make sure that they have a better time than you do, at least for the first few times. And then once you're kind of on the same level, and this goes back to like showing new players into the game, all that stuff. But
the whole social contract of playing these games.
Yeah, absolutely. But once that person, like once you can get them hooked, like they play a game once, they play it twice, and then they have a blast with it, they won't care anymore, right? They're comfortable with the rules. They'll come back, and then you can be like, all right, now we're playing for real. Even if you don't tell them that, you're like, now we're playing for real. But I was like, how many games do you think we've played where I have gone easy on you, or I have been like, I've lost on purpose so that it's not like a complete. And they were like, you would do that, and I was like, you have no idea how many.
Let's be clear. I think we all do this with our friends that are our age. Like I'm in my 40s, and there are times when I'm playing a game with my friends who play games all the time, and I look down at the table, and I'm like, oh, if I do this, I'll win. And they will have a miserable time because they can't do anything about it. I'm going to do something else because I don't need to win that bad. Like it's the same thing on a different level. Like we all have that moment where you look down and say, like, I could do this and maybe I'll win, but it won't be very much fun for me or that other person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, look, no one's saying that when you go into that tournament setting and you have that moment where you're just like, I do this, I win, my opponent will not have the most fun they've ever had. That's all right. Social contract-wise, right? That's you stepped into that. Unless your opponent is like, this is my very first event. I've never played this game before. I'm looking forward to it. And you're like, got you. I got you.
That's also a different conversation.
I think you still do it in that moment. You just explained it afterwards, though. To be clear, it's
sometimes, or I mean, sometimes you're like, I don't really need to completely crush them because I know I'm probably going to win anyway because they've like deployed all of their characters out of cover and they're like moving in weird ways and they clearly like aren't doing command and control like they're. But again, I think the point comes back.
You score 12 VPs, but you don't score 800 kill points.
That's right. You don't just table wipe them. That's all right. There's lots of different ways to do it.
You hares let us tortoises know how that works out for you.
So, but I think again, this all comes down to no one's saying that playing aggressively or hard or whatever in the right circumstance, whether that's a casual pickup game or it's a tournament or whatever. We're not trying to say that one way is better than the other. And I don't want anyone to take it that way. I think that's really important to say that we value competitive play. We have devs like Plummer and Pagani who spent a lot of their original gaming years as competitive only players. Like they went to tournaments, they tried to win worlds. Some of them did, some of them didn't. Sorry, Plummer, you never did.
Yeah, I was bad. I had fun.
It's because you were playing against Pagani's, the Pagani of the world. He took it away from everyone because he always won because he was just that kind of guy. We value that stuff and we understand how strong and important it is to be an aspect of these games. But I think what we're really trying to do here is to say, okay, but that's just one facet, and there's so much other stuff that you can do, and that you have the permission to go do that. The thing that you just always have to keep in mind is that if you're going to play developer, you got to think about the other person across the table too.
Absolutely. And I know, we've talked a lot about the different things that Tours of Duty has added to Legion and in this new narrative format. One of the things you've also added are a few new keywords at the glossary at the end of the rule book for Tours of Duty. Mm-hmm. Is there a plan for those to be ported over to the core Legion rulebook? Are those keywords that are going to be coming into the game?
I would imagine so at some point, on an infinite timeline. Obviously, we put work and everything into it. So yeah, I don't see any reason why not at some point if it makes sense. Maybe sooner than later, but maybe Plummer has some different ideas. He might have made one that I've forgotten. He's like, no, that's so ridiculous. We would never do it. But I've learned in this business to never say never because you almost always wind up at some point eating your words, and then everyone's like, you said that would never happen, and now it's happening. And you're like, well, to be fair, it was 15 years ago. I was an entirely different person.
And
never say never. I know, kind of in that same vein then, there's one keyword in the rule book that, isn't in that glossary. Any idea of what anti-material does that you want to share with us?
I don't think we're allowed to flat out say it yet, but what I would say is if you play detective and you say, oh, they added rules about upgrading dice, and then you go, well, they probably want to use that in more places than just the small subset of rules that are there. And then you go, what's the definition of anti-material and military weapons technology? And you said, it's about getting through like heavy armor. And then you'd go upgrading dice, heavy armor. Right. There's an X value. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. I think the detectives of the world can probably follow the clues and maybe put it together. And I think a few people on the Discord already probably got real close to the the non-technical rules language of it, but then they were shouted down by other people, which is always my favorite part.
That's just the classic internet, isn't it?
Well, that's just gamers in general. I think even pre-internet days, we'd hang out at the game store and we'd be like, what do you think this is going to be? And somebody would be like, I think it's this. And then everyone would be like, I don't agree. And then they'd be like, I think it's this. And the conversation, but it's fun. Those things, speculation, it's more fun to speculate than it is to be right. If the first person who speculates has the right answer and you're just like, yep, that's probably right. You're like, well, that wasn't very fun. This wasn't an enjoyable time. So
the Legion community especially loves to speculate wildly. We saw the sneak peek preview of the General Grievous on the wheel bike. Now everyone's trying to figure out what mobile does. Feel free to share. But there's wild speculation across it that keeps us talking and generates interest in what's coming in the game that I mean, honestly, does as much marketing as just showing what it does straight up. You know,
Well,
people see a rule and then understand it, digest it, and move on. Mm-hmm. Or you see a word that's going to mean something important. Now you have a lot of buzz and chatter about that for a while, and then you share it, and then you also get that chatter.
I think one of the coolest things about this hobby is just how often you can engage with it. Like, sure, I can't play a game of Star Wars Legion right now, this moment, but while I'm, doing work in the back of my head, I can be thinking about like, oh, it'd be really cool if I took this unit with this commander. Or I could think about, like, on my lunch break, I can sit there and think about what I'm going to do in my tours of duty, or how I'm going to do this. Or I can think about paint schemes, or I can send pictures to my friends and say, what do you think of this color scheme? Do you think it would look cool on my lat? And, like, there are so many little moments in the day where you can play Legion in some way, where you can do something that has to do with your hobby. And I think that's one of the best things about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think engaging in that discourse and being like, and speculating and anticipating things, like, it's not untrue to say we try to bake in a lot of that on purpose. We do roadmaps where we show off things so people can talk about it and they can be excited about what's next, because that is one of the coolest things about engaging in a game like Legion or any kind of like lifestyle living game, is that there's always something fresh on the horizon that can dramatically change everything, or not change anything, but just be a neat thing that shows up. And you never know where that's going to land until it does show up. And then even when it does land, sometimes the initial impression of the thing or the way in which the community engages with it at first turns out to be different, a year later, or greater minds come up with these different solutions or these different combos or whatever. And so, it is fun to slip in some Antimaterial 2 or some mobile on a card when it doesn't necessarily make an impact to the game, and let people speculate, and to have that joy of being like, well, I think it's this, I think it's that. What do you think? I mean, let's put together the clues. Like, solving a mystery is fun.
Solving mystery is very fun.
Yeah, and I guess sort of similarly, I know you guys have like the rules forum for Standard Legion, because very niche scenarios come up and you need to decide on what actually is the correct way to play it. But for something like Tours of Duty, do you envision having something similar to like handle those kind of goofy interactions? Or is it more, this is a narrative event, feel free to kind of use your own justification to decide what might happen here?
I think it's safe to say, like, if you're playing Tours of Duty and you have something come up, like, you can roll a die or whatever it is that helps you to figure it out. But then, like, if you ask that question on the rules forum, we'll answer it. We'll figure out if it's a problem. And if it's like a serious problem, we'll probably just update the document to make sure that can't happen anymore, or to fix X, Y, and Z. Because the truth of the matter is, like, we made this gigantic thing, Tours of Duty, right? And it covers all of Legion. Everything that has been made for Legion since its inception has to fit into this new system that we have made. And we're going to miss things, because some things just work differently than others. I've seen a lot of people like wrestling about the Fluttercraft because it doesn't have a hard point. It has a crew that has the weapon. And like, when you're making the rules for what vehicles get, you don't always think about like that one outlier that does this thing, and then that thing doesn't work, and the people that really love that thing get upset. And so then it's our job to like find the solution or not, and figure out what that is. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes we just don't see it. We don't know the problem exists, because there are so many dominoes that if one of them falls in the other room, I don't know it happened. And it still could cause a cascade, but I'm just chilling in here looking at the start of it, and it's fine to me. So come, ask your question, and if it warrants like a full response and a full, like, we're going to fix it, or we need to give us a definitive answer to this, we will absolutely answer it. But also feel free to just roll a die and move on with your campaign and have a good time.
Yeah, that seems appropriate.
Yeah, it makes sense, especially with the, our entire conversation, this last hour about making sure that you're having fun with your opponent. You're not getting held up on the nitty gritty specifics, but everyone is there to enjoy the game for what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, after like the classic response has always been, after you roll the die to keep the game moving, then go post in the forums, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We love it when people ask questions on the forums, because like Plummer said, it's it's another data point that we can aggregate and say, okay, well, this is a weird thing. How do we avoid it in the future? Or is this actually a problem? Like, should we address it? Should we not? Those kinds of things. And so you should never be afraid. Posting on the forums is free. You may not always get an answer, but you are doing the Lord's work, because we're getting all of that info, and it really does help. It does help us be able to analyze, like, maybe our technical language needs a little adjustment, right? And so we can integrate that in the future. We can integrate that right away. We can find that there's a big breakdown, and then we can fix it. We are, as much as we've talked about how everything is a module and it's meant for players to control, we are highly invested in making sure that whatever we're presenting is sound and tight and easy to follow, and that it presents the great experience we want it to present out of the gate, and then players can run with it from there. So it's not like, we're kind of taking that hand wavy, like, whatever, it's a campaign, kid, don't worry about it. Just figure it out. You bother me. It's not like that, right? Like, we want to make sure that anyone who comes into that document, especially because it is kind of targeted at a player who just got their starter, they've played a few learning games, and they're like, this sounds cool. I want to be part of telling my own Star Wars stories. So if you only have, a couple weeks or a month of experience, that rules document needs to be as good as the core rules document does, because we want to make sure that you feel comfortable and you see success. The one thing that drives anybody out of a hobby is when success is just so elusive that they can't find it, especially if you get frustrated, right? No one's here to be frustrated. Everyone's here to have fun, to feel good, and to see that skill development. So we want to bake in success. One of the ways you do that is by trying to have really accessible and tight rules that don't require you to stop telling your story to roll a die, right? That is that is a hallmark of not just that is a hallmark of a great casual game, not a competitive game. A lot of people will be like, tight rule sets are required for competitive games. They're not, because the competitive players are so invested that they will just figure it out.
Yes.
And they're usually the highest level competitive people are the ones who are really good at, like, going through rules and seeing connections and kind of like coding, like reading the code like Neo in the Matrix. And that's how they always come up with their min-maxes and stuff. I mean, that's why we hired a Will Pagani, because he's that way. He's like, where's the loophole? I'll find it. You're like, cool, close that for me, please, and let's move on. But a casual, people are playing casually like myself. I'm playing like once or twice a month, those kinds of things. When I come to a game, especially a game that I don't work on directly, I need that rule book to tell me exactly what's going on. And when we hit a snag where I'm like, I don't actually know, when I have to reach over and grab the rule book and stop everybody from playing and flip through the rules and try to figure it out, the magic of the moment is gone. And it is very hard to recapture that. You can, but like, you think about the best experiences or the best game nights you had, it was when you just played the game with your opponent. You didn't think about the rules. They were natural. You knew exactly what to do, and the game flowed, and you got this great experience out of it. The times where you probably didn't have as much fun is like, everyone hates first game night with a game, because it's like, it's going to take us 2 extra hours. We're going to check the rules a lot. And then at the end, we're going to be like, did we have fun? I don't know. I think so. I liked it when this happened, but there was also 3 hours of you trying to figure out how that interacted with that. And we had to go on the online. We don't want that, right? If we can avoid that, there's naturally going to be a learning curve to these games. It's every game has it. But once you've gotten past that learning stage, ideally, if we've done our jobs well and we're hitting the mark, you're not going to have to be like, uh-oh, we've run into an interaction, and now we have to stop everything and figure out how this interaction works. Those are the things to us that are like, those are the big failures that we take very seriously and we want to try to solve. And if you can do that, then now those players are going to have an amazing time, and they're not going to have to stop the experience, and they're going to tell their cool stories, and they're going to move out of it, and they're going to be like, I can't wait to do it again.
Right. And the whole living, breathing rule book really helps with that. And, personal thank you to whoever highlights the new things added in blue. It makes our lives so much easier.
I think that's a combination of Andrew Dursum, our lead dev, and Ryan, our graphic designer of Legion Extraordinaire. So, yeah, they work that stuff out. No, it's an exciting time, I think, in the, exciting and difficult. It's kind of like to borrow from a different IP, With great power, there must also come great responsibility. You talk about, we talked a lot about the nostalgia of like 90s and early 2000s gaming, pre-internet and information dissemination. If you wanted an update to the game you loved, you waited until the next edition. That was kind of it. Maybe if there was a magazine or periodical that had some info in it, you might get little bits and scraps, but like there wasn't really FAQs, there weren't really erratas that happened in any kind of meaningful way, because there was no way to globally make sure that everyone had access to that. There was no real way to disseminate that outside of making another book or another supplement or whatever, and then hoping that everyone bought it or had access to it to be able to make these changes, right? That wasn't how it worked. And now we've gotten to a point to where the internet and information dissemination is like instant and all these things. And we've seen this trend in games like Legion where players now expect tabletop games to kind of more be treated like video games, where these patches happen maybe super frequently, maybe, everyone's got their own, like, what's the perfect amount. But the difference, and we can update the game to our heart's content now and just post update after update. The reality is that the computer running these games is your brain, which means that, it's not the console or the PC that's going to just adjust automatically to all the new rules that we've implemented in these patches. You and your opponent and everyone else has to reset your programming to be like, okay, this is how it works. And while our brains are probably more powerful than the most powerful computers, they're also kind of flawed, right? They deal with a lot, because it's not just information processing they deal with. It's also like making you breathe and keeping you alive. All these things that magically happen every day that you don't think about because your brain is taking care of it. And it's trying to like not steal all the energy from the rest of your vital organs and all these things. So like, I think that's where the responsibility comes in. It's like, yes, you can change anything whenever you want. And there are people who advocate for that. But at the same time, like, you have to be confident in what you're putting out, that it's correct. You also have to make sure that when you make changes, you're making changes with purpose and decision, and that you're taking into account the cognitive load that you're continuing to put on players, especially long-standing players. When nobody wants to be like a dev and have 14 different rule sets in their head that are all different slight variations, right? Like, people always kind of like to rag on us when we play games. They're like, how do you not know these rules? And it's like, well, we do, but we rely a lot on being able to like recheck. So we play pretty slow and to be like, oh, we changed this, we did that. Mm-hmm. And it's just one of those things where like you can handle only so much information before you start to get wires crossed. And we don't want to do that to the main population, because again, we don't want you to have to go check the rules.
Yeah, and I think I can claim the crown of being the old man who yells at the cloud in the office the most. And I have railed many times against like I miss playing games back before the internet, when I could like solve it for myself and I didn't have to just check a YouTube video to know what list to play. Rah rah rah. But at the same time, I'm very grateful for the fact that when we mess something up, we can update the document, or like if something just needs an update, not even that it was messed up, but just, I said it the other day on this, like linear time works a certain way, and something new gets made that makes something old go super busto or just not do anything at all. That can be changed pretty quickly and pretty easily in a way that a lot of people get that information. So there are goods and bads to both sides, and I think it's very much you got to walk that line of making your changes with intent and putting things out quickly, but making sure that you're only putting out things that need to go out. It's a mixed bag.
Absolutely. I know we are approaching the end of our time, so I guess at this point I'll toss it up for any final thoughts on Towards a Duty you want to share with us before we sign off, as we lose Will.
I lost Will.
I mean, not so much, I guess, thoughts, but just like a huge thank you to all the people in the community that have been excited about this, like right from the minute that it came out. It's been so gratifying to just see people get excited about something new and a new way to play, and see how much conversation there's been about Towards of Duty. So thank you for your passion, for your excitement, and like, talk about your games in the Discord, talks about your games on Facebook and stuff. We love reading that stuff. We love seeing that stuff, and have fun with it. Can't wait to hear what everybody comes up with.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely agree with everything that was said there. I think, again, hopefully if anybody takes anything from this, it's the idea that we are creating a bigger and bigger sandbox, and the goal of that is to bring value to all of the amazing, Star Wars Legion miniatures that you've collected and painted and you want to play with. And you're like, oh, this unit isn't very good in tournaments, but there's always going to be a balance curve. However, maybe you can take that unit that you really love and do a tours of duty with it. Maybe you can apply some different ideas to it to kind of let you explore and play the way that you want to play with the community that's around you. So don't be afraid, to try some different things. And we're going to continue to put out hopefully exciting and interesting different ways to kind of tweak the experience or to fully play in different modes and all of that stuff. And I think all of it is as valuable as the next thing. And the more diverse and robust we can make this game from our perspective, the healthier and bigger it's going to get. So there's Star Wars for everyone, as they like to say. There's also Star Wars Legion for everyone. Mm-hmm. And our goal is to try to make sure that everyone is serviced in that way.
Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you again for coming on and chatting with us and talking about the fun new stuff you made for us and the Legion community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. We'll have to have you back on after Mini Stravaganza. Talk about
you're officially members of Crit to Block now, apparently. So
that's true.
We'll see you in 2 weeks, I guess, when we re-record.
Nailed it. All right. Well, you just let our marketing team know and be like, sorry, this is the rule now. Gotta follow the rules.
Well, excellent. So thank you everyone for watching again. Go enjoy your tours of duty. Let them know what the kind of fun you're having out there, and don't forget to Crit to Block.